Hello, I'm Jason Paul and welcome to the Soul Sync podcast. It's lovely to have you here, all of my dears. Now, in this episode, I'm speaking to a Scottish medium called Dominic Boag. This episode is centred around a question that I think almost everyone has asked at some point. What really happens when a medium connects to spirit? Now, not what it looks like from the outside, not what people assume is happening, but what's actually going on in that moment. Because whether you believe in this work, you're developing it yourself, or you've simply experienced something that you simply just can't quite explain, there's always that deeper curiosity. Now, some of the questions I've asked myself is this real? Where is this coming from? And how does this actually work? And that's exactly where we explore in this particular conversation. Now, this isn't about performance. It's not about trying to prove anything. It's about understanding the process behind connection. What does it actually feel like to connect to spirit? How much information comes through? How do we feel it? How do we articulate that? How do we channel it? And that's what we're going to be talking about in this conversation. So sit back, relax, enjoy, put your feet up, get a cuppa, and take a moment for you. You're going to enjoy this conversation. Oh, Dominic, I'm excited.
So am I.
Welcome. It's lovely, firstly, to have you on the Soul Sync. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for reaching out and having me as your guest.
Well, do you know what? I was saying to you before we hit the record button, you are one of the people who's got requested to me to come on, and I can understand why, because you know, your story, firstly, is fascinating because, you know, first things first, you know, I'll let you introduce yourself, but your journey into mediumship was a very young age. And that was the first thing that jumped out at me about you, because it's in stark contrast to my own background in some ways. So to take, I guess, to lead us in then, you are a medium. You travel all around the world doing your mediumship teaching, doing readings, and so on. But I guess I want to first understand how, you know, mediumship, the spirit, first came into your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, I was very young. I still tell this all the time to people. I used to think I was normal, to be honest with you. But again, don't we all? But looking back, there was different things happening in my life that I realised I was very psychic, very intuitive, which of course is a natural faculty with everyone. But I was never aware of spirit. I was never aware of the dead, if you want to say, or even had any reason to think about, you know, spirits or mediumship. But sadly, my own father passed away very suddenly and unexpected when I was 14. And the same evening that the police had come to say that he had been found passed away, I remember going up to my bedroom, and I was sitting on the computer where it was the big screens, and it was back in the Yahoo Messenger days when you would message your friends. And I was messaging my friends and just saying, you know, I won't be at school for a few weeks. You know, I'll give you guys a call. And, you know, I could really feel a lot of like static is the only way I could describe it, a lot of change. My hairs and my arms were standing up. I had that horrible feeling that someone was watching me. And as I started to like turn ever so anxiously and look towards the door, my own father was standing there as plain as you and I right now. And it could have been a minute, it could have been 10 minutes, but it felt just very much like we were both just in this unique space. And as I was looking at him, he must have could tell that I was taken aback or shocked. And he basically told me that, you know, he was perfectly fine, not to worry about what the police had said. You know, he was perfectly fine. He had found his mom, his family in the spirit world, and that it was my job to now look after the family and to look after mom, my little brother, and my sister. And as quick as he told me all of that, he was gone. He was gone, and the room just became so cold and so charged, is the only way I could describe it. Was my first ever experience of what now I know to be spirit. So I always used to think I was normal. I had no inclination of life after death. I used to be actually quite scared of death. And what I mean by that is, what would my life be like without my mom or my dad? Or what if my grandparents pass away and they're not here? That fear of losing people you love, I was always really quite scared of. But then no 14-year-old should really need to be thinking about death, should they? So that was my first experience of spirit and communicating with spirit, I guess you could say.
Wow, to have that happen at such a young age, and so suddenly after losing your father, and yeah, you're right. You don't at that age. You shouldn't be thinking about death.
No.
It shouldn't be something that's at the forefront of your mind. So that happened. I guess in that moment that was probably a very confusing thing to happen.
Yeah.
But some level of reassurance in the same time. So that acted as a catalyst. And where did you go and what did you do with it from there?
I kept it in the closet, to say. So I kept it all to myself. The last thing I wanted to do is run downstairs and, tell my broken and my devastated mother, like, hey, I just saw dad. He's fine or whatever. So I really kept it to myself. Bear in mind, I was still in school at that age as well. So we tried to get back to normality. But things just started to really get stranger and stranger. I would be in town with my grandma, and just as she would be standing talking to people, I would be looking at the other people and I would be getting annoyed. Like, why is no one acknowledging this man? Like, why is no one talking to him? So there's Dominic, like, tried to give the side eye and give him a wave or whatever. And I would say to my grandma, that was extremely rude. Why did you not talk to Jean's husband? And my grandma would go, oh, Jean's husband's been dead for years, son. And I'm like, well, who was the man? Never mind, so I didn't really want my family thinking that I was going crazy. I was, getting into trouble a lot at school for, hearing things and muttering at the back of the class, like, no, what you talking, go away, who, what? So then the teachers would start thinking that, I was being disruptive and being rude. Little did they know that it was, their people actually trying to talk to me. But a few months after we had said goodbye to dad and mum trying to come back to terms with things, she went to our local spiritualist church. And I was working, I started working really young. I was a youth worker for our local council as a drama teacher and youth support worker. So I was working. So my mum went to the medium, the spiritualist church, and my dad had actually came through the medium. And she had said to the medium had said to my mum all this different information. It's your husband, and she gave him the evidence. And then the medium says to my mum, "Your husband's telling me that I've to help your son because your son can hear the voice of spirit." And my mum, very bold and very blunt, says, well, I've actually got two sons." And the lady turned around and says, "Yeah, but you've only got one that's 14. And she said, "Yeah, well, that's true." She said, "Well, your son's seen your husband, he spoke to him and whatever else." So that same night of my mum being at that spiritual church, I came home and she was sitting in the kitchen and she says, "I want a word with you." So I was like, "Oh God, what have I done?"
She was about to take you out the closet, Dominic.
Yeah, you better believe it. So it's like, yeah, what? I was like thinking, is the school called or has something happened? She says, if you've been seeing things or hearing things, I'm like, it sounds like crazy, but I'm like, do I tell her? Do I not? Do I tell her? I says, well, remember the night that the police came and I told her eventually about dad, and she says, well, I've just been, now I had never heard of a medium. So she says, I've just been to this spooky church and your dad came and spoke. So in my mind, I'm like, no, dad's gone. I remember cremating him. I remember this horrific day as his dad's gone. And she went on to tell me the information. A few weeks later, I decide I'm going to this crazy place. I'm going to see what these people are all about. So I went to the spiritualist church. As I sat up the back, it was, quite a small local kind of hall, if anything. It could hold maybe 50 people. And so I sat right at the back of the room thinking, these people are all crazy. They're all insane. What is going on? And I was obviously the youngest there. I stood out like a sore thumb. They were all, maybe 40 and 50 and above. But the medium came on, or the chairperson had said the medium tonight has had to cancel, so Sandra's going to fill in. I didn't know that Sandra was the same lady that had connected to my mum. And she started talking to people, and it was almost like I was at the back of the room hearing Margaret, and then the medium would say, you would understand your mum's Margaret. I'm going, where does that come from? And then she'd move on to someone else, and I would get, like a strange image of, two cars colliding. And she would begin, now I've got this young man that I know was in a car smash or a car accident. I'm going, what the hell is going on? And then at the end, she says, and the young boy just at the back of the room. And of course, what did I do? I turned to look to see who was at the back of the room, and there was the brick wall. And she says, yes, you, son. She's like, your dad's here. I was like, all right. She was able to tell me the street name of where my dad had passed away. She was able to tell me, really precise details. And she says, your dad's telling me that when you're ready, I'll help you understand what's been going on. And she must have seen the look in my face. She says, you've been listening and hearing some of the things just before I said it. I'm like, So she says to me, why don't you come to our circle? Like, what the hell is a circle? And I kind of gave her the look of it, yeah, sure, whatever. And she told me, a Tuesday night is this night, a Wednesday night will be this, and a Thursday. Okay. And I left it for a week because I just couldn't understand. I was like, what is going on? Like, how did she know that my dad was found in this street? Like, how did she know that? But how was I knowing things that she was about to say? So I tried to understand, and there was no way I was ever going to understand. But of course, Jason, I went, didn't I? I went to the circle the following week, and no word of a lie. Being a spiritualist church, the night that I decided to go to the development circle was actually their annual general meeting. So we all know what happens at AGMs. They were all arguing and fighting. And, I was just thinking, this is great. If this is what I'm going to get out of this is fabulous. But as the president at the time had got up and left, something just made me get up off my chair and follow her out the door, down the stairs, followed her along the path. She went in her driver's side of her car. I opened the passengers and sat in the car. And I was like, so what do we do now? And ever since then, she kind of took me under her wing, and I sat in her circle 3 evenings a week at the age of 14 to really understand what was going on with me. Yeah.
But I guess the experiences you were having were, even to be seeing things visually that seem so real, that's not a normal thing to see physical manifestations. I've only ever seen it once, and it was an outline. But to be having that, and to be, it's, you can use this word, and we, when I read your show notes, actually, there's that word there about gifted, and you mentioned that, but and I'm a firm believer that everyone can connect to the spirit world, but for you to be having such really extreme experiences there and things, I can understand you needed to go to that circle at 14 to understand what the hell was going on. Like you needed that understanding and support.
I thought I was going crazy. I'm just trying to live my normal life at school and try and scrape by with some grades. And it's the easiest way I could describe developing mediumship is like you're trying to put a jigsaw puzzle together, but you don't have the box to show you what the image is. So piece by piece, as you click it all together, you finally go, oh, it's an orca, it's a killer whale. So you don't have a gauge, you can't understand it. So I was very appreciative that woman was willing to take on this, schoolboy, I guess you could say, and really help me understand. But is there a bigger picture there? Was there a bigger plan? I really don't know, but we were obviously brought together for a reason. So the images and the clairvoyance, say in my book, I was always very clairvoyant. I always could see the spirit in my mediumship. That was my strength. To a point, I was able to see, men's names tattooed on their knuckles when I'm able, like, was your brother Ronald? Like, because he's got R-O on his knuckle. Like, I was able to see so precisely spirit, so clear. Like, to the point I really got confused with who was dead and who was alive. And, I think they got my attention from the get-go.
Well, they certainly did that, didn't they?
Yeah, to really get my attention, and then they took it from there, I guess you could say.
I guess, and this is what I'm coming to find with my unfoldment. All of our journeys of unfoldment are very different, and I believe it happens for a reason when the time is meant to be. And, I look back at my life now a lot, and I, really, wonder how much free will was really involved, because I start looking at things and I start thinking, that coincidence that happened there when I was in that place at that time, was that meant to be? But talking about the journey of unfoldment, because it is something that is so unique for everyone. And I think this is why it's also so difficult to sometimes develop your mediumship, because it's such a personal thing that when people are trying to get you to unfold, assisting one to unfold or to develop, whatever you want to call it. But it's a difficult old journey for you, because you were already having such strong experiences. And what was that journey like for you, and how did you sort of start to unfold that and work with that and develop that?
We'll be right back.
Hello there, Soul Sink, it's me. I interrupt this episode for just a moment to ask, if you find this podcast at all helpful, please leave a review on the platform where you listen to them. It helps other people to find it, and it means the world to me. Now enjoy your episode.
To be honest, even still to this day, I still haven't really had the chance to really reflect back, even though, I've written my life story. Even going back and through all of that process, it's hard to really comprehend, because everything just really unfolded naturally, which sounds really bizarre. But, even when I would be at Development Circle, my teacher, she certainly put me through my paces, and she gave me the opportunities, even to get to a place of being comfortable and her trust in me. I started demonstrating spiritualist churches in the UK at 16, So she then had me on platform with her and giving the messages, and really that just came naturally, because it wasn't something that I ever wanted to pursue. I didn't plan to be a medium. I didn't even know that this was something that was possible or something that people were interested in. So things just started to really unfold. And again, even with friends, I still kept it to myself, even in school. My friends Rachel and William and things would say to me, "Oh, will we meet up tonight?" And I'm like, "Tonight, not Tuesday." "Oh no, I've got such and such." So I would make excuses because I couldn't meet with friends because I was going to Tuesday's book club. But I started, But I starting to notice people in the church congregation, people that worked in the school office, and such's mum who's in my year. Like, people are starting to come that I actually know, so people might start, learning about me.
The secret the cat might get out the bag.
The cat certainly was getting out the bag, that's for sure, with claws. But then people started really coming to the church and saying, do you do private readings? Can you do private readings? Will you do private readings? And I seen that as a good opportunity to, whilst I was coming to the church, saying to people, I don't really know what a private reading is or whatever, but what I do standing up there, I'm pretty sure I could do sitting on a chair. And I started to do private readings for the church, and put money into the church to help pay for funds. So basically at 16, I was then starting to do, private readings, and, demand just grew from there. Then I had other spiritualist churches asking me, will you come here? Will you come there? Will you do this? Will you do that? And before I know it, going from 16 to then 17 years old, and, things starting to unfold. But it was very, I'd like to say very natural, but I don't want to say easy. Okay, I would like to say it was a way of life that I had to learn to understand. And it was a way of life that I would say I became comfortable with once I started to realise that I wasn't crazy, and these images I'm seeing, these names or these voices and these people I'm seeing are actually spirit. They're not dead people. And that really helped me.
It's even sort of dedicating so much of your life to it as well, and it being such a central theme to everything that you've done. I just, I struggle to even comprehend doing that myself at 14 or 16 when I look back at where I was. So it's just very interesting.
Maybe I had nothing better to do.
Well, do you know what? To dedicate so much of your life, I can understand. But for you, I think, when you explain that story to me, it almost kind of feels that the circle that you went to was very much kind of like a healing thing that you had to go to just to understand what was happening for you. And, I remember thinking back to myself when I was at school, I knew I was different. I knew that. I couldn't articulate why, but I knew I just had this sense of wisdom. But there is a difference between wisdom and common sense. I would have wisdom, but I would still lack common sense. But I knew that there was something about me that just felt like I was very sensitive and able to sense things and perceive it. But
yes,
but it took me a long time to really believe in the spirit world, even though my own granddad was a medium, because I wanted to believe it. I did, but I thought it was more wishful thinking than reality for quite a long time. So you kind of went on this, what feels like the absolute bullet train of development.
Yeah.
And that sort of took you, into what it feels like, as you doing that as a profession at a very, young age.
Yeah.
And you just used a very interesting word there, which is flow. It was flowing. And, I think there's a lot to be said for that in life, because things should flow. They shouldn't be,
Should be a struggle.
No, they shouldn't. And I think we can try a lot in our lives to really control our lives, to the 8th degree, and it feel like our lives are out of control. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. So I want to sort of get lots of value for the listeners today as well, because you've been unfolding and working with people to do that for quite, for many, many years now. So I guess, when you're trying to take people through that journey of unfolding their mediumship, how is it that you, sort of try to help people navigate that from all that you've learned? Because it's, it's a difficult thing to try and help people, I think it is anyway. I think out of all subjects, it's a very difficult subject to teach, because it's so personal and feels so different to everyone.
Well, that's the beauty of this type of thing. And, the journey is certainly a strong word to use and a good word to use. Developing is a journey. It's something that is personal, and it's something that is always going to be different for so many people. My approach to teaching is keep it natural. I always look at students and look at what their abilities are or what uniqueness they've got. And I try to keep it organic. And one of the things I really pride myself in with teaching is I nourish people, even if they're not doing good, or even if they're miles off. I always try to bring them about and say, yeah, but look at what you were able to do here, and let's really focus on that. And, I see so many students come and they've been to, this course, this college, that academy, and they become so destroyed at times with some teachings that I think, if you can't help people, then at least don't be cruel to them, because it's hard enough. And, I'm a true believer that developing mediumship can be a very lonely journey as well. So I teach from experience. That's the easiest way I do it. But I also come from a different perspective of, I put myself in the spirit side of life and think, well, what's happening with them as they're trying to communicate with the medium? How are they able to communicate what's going on there rather than the demand of the medium of want? You know, I try to look at it in both perspectives. But, you know, my teachings are very crazy, very unique, very, you know, personal experiences that I've tried and tested throughout my 20 years of working with spirit. Even today, some of the things are so out there, so crazy that no one in their right mind would even teach, you know? And that's why I always say to my students, my teachings may sound simple, they may sound crazy, but I assure you they're effective. You see, but one thing I always stress to any students is please do not come into my class, my workshop or my course and try to be me. It's not possible. There's something very special in you as a student, and that's why the spirit have got your attention. So if you try to be another Dominic or another Doris Stokes or Estelle Roberts, or if you try to be anyone else, then you're denying the spirit the gift is seen in you. So I give them that from the get-go of come in and just be you. I can't teach you how to be a medium, but I can help you understand what maybe abilities you've got and help you strengthen them. The rest is up to the student and the spirit world. You know, I can give them the soil and give them the pot and the water and, you know, the daylight, but they have to plant the seed. And once they plant the seed, then it's up to them to let it bloom. So I like to think I'm a farmer by keeping the organicness and the natural, and just try to help them be comfortable in being themselves, to be truly honest.
It is, and it's the beauty of that individuality in mediumship, I think, because, you know, I can understand why we find ourselves in situations where we, you know, when you look at a teacher who's doing mediumship and, you know, you can surrender your power a lot of the time to that of a teacher. And you make an interesting point about courses, I have to say. You can find yourself going on however many courses for your development, but, you know, courses are only going to get you so far, because, you know, I think a lot of the work of mediumship is you have to work through a lot of your own stuff as well. And it's, you know, I ask myself at times, why do I keep going back to mediumship? Why does it drag me back so much? Because it actually improves every other area of my life.
Of course it does.
And it's the one time when I go and throw myself into mediumship that do you know what? I absolutely love getting the advice from the spirit world. I think, please, bring it on. I need that at times in my life, because, you know, it's very, very reassuring. And, you know, mediumship is one of those things where I feel like I just can't stop getting drawn back to it, because it absolutely fascinates me, because it's, you know, the unknown, isn't it? And
well, the thing is with mediumship, it's something that I always preach. Mediumship, it's a way of life. You know, it's a way of life. And I always say to students as well, you know, mediumship is like a muscle. It needs to be exercised, and the more it's exercised and practiced and used, the stronger it will become. But the more familiar you'll become with it. You see, and on that journey with developing your mediumship, whether you're using it, doing private readings or demonstrating, or maybe just as self-development, the most important thing, the most beautifulest thing is for you to build that relationship with the spirit world. You see, and when we build that spirit relationship, then all I can say is the opportunities and the possibilities are endless. It's we who will restrict ourselves. So it's just allowing them to be a part of us and to go through life as one, knowing that we're fine, we're normal, and, you know, just allow the journey to unfold rather than try to manufacture it or control it. Just go with it.
And if people do want to sort of go on that journey to build that relationship with spirit, you know, what would you advise them to do, and how to do that?
Just sit. You know, a lot of people get so fixated on meditation and things like this. You know, I used to come home, and I like the dark. It's just me. But I would sit in the dark, and I would just sit silently. And in my mind, you know, I would call out to my dad, or I would ask Spirit, you know, I am here for you. Come closer to me. And I would just talk and have that conversation with the spirit, and I would familiarize, you know, certain feelings and sensations that I now know 100% is when Spirit's with me. So when things would happen, when I would get my calling card or my shiver, I would then feel the presence of the Spirit. And that's where I would, talk and ask, where are we going from here? Where did it go wrong last night? What could I do differently for you? And I guess you could say I would just plead my heart out to them, but take yourself away from all distractions. Hence why, I encourage the dark if you're comfortable, because we can easily, our mind is like a little monkey. It can jump around too quick or go from, relaxing and concentrating on your breath and, really getting comfortable and what am I going to make for dinner tomorrow? I'll need to go pay that bill and remember to go to Tesco's and get, your mind then goes wandering. So it's not staying with the objective. So if we're in the darkness or if we have no distractions, then it comes down to just having a communication or a thought that, will then lead into more and more. So creating a beautiful space, some people call it sitting in the power or whatever. I just like to call it, sitting with Spirit and giving them the invitation to come close and to share a moment together. So just doing that on a regular basis and familiarizing yourself with the presence of the Spirit.
I think sitting for Spirit is such a better... I'm starting to think that's such a better term than sitting in the power, because sitting in the power requires you to feel that you are needing to do something, to charge something, to build something.
Exactly.
And I think even the word power implies that there is effort required, which puts you back in the head, rather than if someone said you just sit for Spirit. What should I do? Jason, just do nothing. Just sit, because that is the nightmare at the start. Is the mind, and I can sit down and even though I've been practicing this now for a long old time, when I sit down now, some days my mind is just a nightmare at times. And, I'll be sitting there and I will be just about quieting down and I think, oh, something's come back into my mind. It's something so trivial. And I think, be quiet. But a lot of people now, they expect a lot to happen very quick in mediumship. And it's not, even to go on the journey of quietening the mind is, takes control, takes practice. And you're right in what you're saying. It's like a muscle.
Yeah.
You're building up and learning to flex. But we expect a lot very quickly these days, don't we? We want
the expectations are high.
Well, there's a masterclass. By the end of today, I will be an expert, Dominic.
I love
it. Yes.
You're welcome.
Yes. So it's, we were all in a rush these days. So, I wanted to, very helpfully in the show notes, you've directed me to a couple of You and I Will Always Be Stuck Together, a story. And I do want to come on to some of these beautiful, apparently you know what that means, this show.
I do indeed, yes. Well, it's quite a lot to go into depth with for you just to read. But, you did ask for some, experiences or some, messages and things that have stood out. And this is one that I still tell to this day, to be honest. But a few years back, I was doing readings in Manhattan in New York, and I had this young lady come for private reading, and she was, if she was 50, then she was only 50 that day. She was really young, and I was very aware of a beautiful, muscular, tall, beautiful man that came in with her in the spirit world. So as she sat down, I began the reading, and I always sit with a scribble or a notepad, exactly like you see with Tyler Henry. That's nothing new for mediums, just new on television. So I scribble, I doodle away, and I kept hearing, "You and I will always be stuck together." So I thought, well, that's a bit generic. That's a bit beige. I could say that to everyone. Sounds wonderful. But again, I never deny spirit. But I says to her, this man who, said was her husband, he passes, how he passes and the situation. Says, but he keeps telling me, you and I will always be stuck together. So I scribble it down, I keep writing, and I think if I says to her about 20 times, then that's an understatement. But then I got into, he's bringing my attention to just a few months ago, you and your son had celebrated a special anniversary, but he was also a part of it for spirit. She says, that's correct. They says, he's showing me helium balloons. And she went, okay. And I says, but they're letters. She says, I says, right, okay. I says, but then he's now telling me to talk about Central Park. I says, there must be something to do with Central Park and his name. And she says, that's correct. You and I will always be stuck together. It kept coming so persistently. I says, well, he's talking about the balloons. He's laughing about the balloons, the helium balloons. I says, but eventually you let the balloons go, the helium balloons go. She says, that's correct. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, this does not make sense. But again, it's not my reading to try to understand. I just kept it flowing and, it was a beautiful reading. I says, I need to ask, I says, because this is so weird. So as I finished the reading, I says, do you mind if I ask you why you are so relating to you and I will always be stuck together? And she cried the whole way through the reading, but not of a sadness, but almost of a relief, you see. And I kept writing it down, the balloon, helium, blah, blah, blah. And she says to me, the anniversary you were talking about with, me and my son done, she says, we done our anniversary for our wedding. I says, okay. She says, we had some friends round. She says, we live directly across from Central Park. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe that was the Central Park. I said, wonderful. She says, no. She says, it gets better. Okay. She says, out on our balcony, she says, we had helium balloons. I says, yeah. She says, we had the initial I. She had red, love heart, and the initial U. I says, oh, the letters, right, okay. She says, and what we done, myself and my son, we said a little speech for our husband or his dad, and eventually we then let the balloons go to blow out into the sky. She says, and as they blew over into the distance, she says, the I and the U got entangled in the trees and the love heart went up into the sky and blew over the building. Says, oh, right, okay. She says, and we're there for 2 weeks. She says, and eventually my husband's friend has said, this is getting ridiculous. We have to go and, get them down. So they go away over to Central Park, the thing where the balloons are. And as she got to the balloons or the tree to go up and get, she looked down and someone had placed flowers with his name on it. And she pulled the I and the U. She took them home, she deflated them, she creased them out, and she framed them. And they now sit in her lounge in New York in a beautiful big frame. You and I are still stuck together.
Oh,
yeah.
Story.
It gives me shivers, gives me goosebumps. But again, I had no clue what I was talking about. Something that I felt very generic. You and I all stuck together, but I had to just let it unfold. But so she had to go back and get those big foil balloons and let the helium out. And I guess you could say she preserved them in the frame. So, yeah.
There's a lot to be said for that story because trusting in what we're getting in that moment, because it reminds me back to readings I've done over a period of time when I felt that something is very generic, but this is where the mind gets in the way. It's taken me, I've been in a long place for a long time with my mediumship, Dominic, where I don't realise it, but the evidence goes ding straight into my head, and I didn't even realise I was doing it for a long time. Yeah. But the beauty in that, and the impact that had, and is absolutely beautiful.
Well, that's why we do what we do. That's if we really scrape back the purpose of a medium. The purpose of a medium isn't to prove life after death. The purpose of a medium is to help heal the grieved and the broken heart on both sides of life. You see, so when it's done personally, what I feel, I'm not perfect. I'm still developing it, all the years on, and I still screw up and get it wrong. But when the intention is right and when the need is there, then beautiful things can happen. And, that's just a little example of how intelligent and how clever spirit are.
What are some of the greatest lessons that spirit have taught you along the way then in the unfoldment of your mediumship?
A lot of things, to be truly honest, but one of the greatest things I've learned is to stop trying to be perfect. Even in my daily life, I've always said to Spirit World, let me have a normal life as well. I'll always do what I can for you, but let me have a normal life. And one of the things I've always heard echo back is, it's okay to get it wrong. Don't be perfect. Don't be perfect. And I would always say, but why not? Why not? Why can it not be perfect? And what I kept getting told back was, if you get it perfect all the time, young man, then we are nothing to you. We've nothing we can learn. We've nothing we can share with you. It then becomes boring. It then becomes dead. And that's so true, because if it's constantly perfect, then you have no room to improve or no room for more to learn. So, one of the greatest things is to stop trying to be so perfect and just do your best is the most important thing. But also, even in mediumship itself, allowing the unfoldment to just be natural, like we said earlier, not to try to need to, evoke a power or anything. Just keep it natural and keep it realistic is something. But spirit share so many different things that even you don't realise what they're doing right at that moment. And then maybe a week later you go, oh, now I see it all now, or now I get it. But one thing I will share with listeners is love always wins. Love always wins. And that for me is why the spirit world comes to communicate as well, is because of that unconditional love and that bond of the love. So no matter what is going on, or no matter what happens in your life, just know that love always finds a way. Love always wins.
I think that's a very good message in the times that we're in at the moment. And, I think you make some really valid points there. You are at the moment, you've got a very busy year by the sounds of it. You're going to Plymouth, to Scotland, to the USA. Sounds like a world tour, Dominic, to be quite frank.
It's actually funny because I've actually kind of scaled down a little bit. I'm not doing as much as what I normally do, which is nice. But yeah, I've just about to in 2 weeks start my international travel. So yeah.
Interesting. Well, would you like to leave us on a final note today then? And I must say, your book is beautiful. It's a very nice book. And that's your book titled The Voice of Spirit. I like it as well, Dominic, because the text is slightly bigger and my eyes are getting worse. So
welcome to my world. But
it's a book that I don't need to wear my glasses to read for a change. And there's very few of those now.
Well, I try to keep it an easy read, as I says to you, but, I wanted to really write that book so that people out with mediumship, out with spiritualism, out with this type of world could pick it up and maybe get a little bit of insight into the normality of it, if I can even call myself normal, but to help educate, not from a, you don't die, but from another point of view of how their loved ones could communicate, and to look at a bigger picture, and to also empower young people as well. Like, if you feel that you're different or strange, well, there may be an actual beautiful gift in there. And so don't be scared to be different. It's certainly a message that I would leave with a lot of the listeners as well, is don't be scared to be different. Don't be scared to be unique and be you. And if you are developing mediumship, just remember that, the spirit want you. They don't want another Dominic or another Jason or whatever they want. They just want you to be you. So if you are going on a journey of unfolding and developing your mediumship, maybe just give yourself the little nod that you are worthy and that you are good enough and that you don't need to be anyone else. So go out into the world and shine your little light, because the spirit world will then soon make it a beacon of hope and maybe a rainbow in someone else's storm. So yeah, definitely. And my parting words will be, if you cannot help someone, then at least be kind to them. And if you cannot love them, don't be cruel to them.
Oh, I love that message. I love that. Embrace your individuality and shine very bright. Dominic, thank you for coming on the Soul Sync. It's been a delight, my dear.
Absolute pleasure. Sincerely, thank you very much. And I look forward to us maybe doing it again sometime. So sincerely, thank you so much for taking time and having me.
Embrace you. You are wonderful. You are amazing. You are the best. Embrace you, because no one else will. I think that was a bloody lovely conversation, don't you think? But in all seriousness, you are worthy. You are the light. You are God. God is eternal. Everything that you need can be accessed. You are a being of limitless potential. And on that note, Soul Sync, I wish you a very lovely week. I'm sending you a lot of love as always. You can always as well subscribe to my YouTube channel, Jason Paul Soul Sync. Go there. I'm going to be releasing mediumship videos soon where I'm going to talk much more in depth about my mediumship, because sometimes I don't always get the chance on this podcast, and I'm going to talk to you and you can see me, so just subscribe there. But until next time, lots of love.